one of the most fundamental movements we emphasize here at Structure is the toe touch, also known as the hip hinge. This is a commonly misunderstood exercise when it comes to correcting and understanding why it does or does not happen. Now, when you go down to reach your toes, if you cannot reach your toes, there may be a few reasons for that. Number one, you probably don't know how to breathe correctly. What I mean by that, when you reach down to touch your toes, if you hold your breath and push out on your belly slash diaphragm and all this rib cage and pelvis, air will get in the way. So that's one of the most common things that we find. Number two, we find that people don't necessarily have the balance to reach forward without falling forward. This is a common thing because most people think balance only pertains to left and right. But when it comes to shifting your weight forward and or backwards, a lot of people don't necessarily know how to do that. And this anterior-posterior balance is something that we teach here at the gym. And I'll go over those exercises in a minute. The third thing I think important to remember is that some muscles don't always function at the right time and in the right order. What that means is that basically, commonly, the adductors, the muscles that are on the inside of the thigh, also function as hip extenders. Why that really matters is that if they're pulling and pushing incorrectly, then they're kind of turning the knees together. It's very difficult to reach to your toes if the alignment is incorrect. So I think those are some of the most important things to think about when it comes to touching your toes and or learning the hip hinge. And then the last thing I think to think about is that people just don't know what it is. For our youth, they tend to hip hinge from a little bit higher. This is called the thoracic lumbar junction, where the thoracic or middle back meets the lumbar spine. Okay? This is a potentially dangerous thing because that's where we need stability, and that's often where it isn't. The second concept behind that is that the hip hinge being taught, right, also known as the deadlift, the kettlebell swing, this is the most athletic position in sports. So being and understanding this position, if you're too far forward or you don't understand how to balance, then we might have a bad situation when it comes to lower back pain. So all of this is important, not just to teach you these next exercises, but to understand that back pain, in our experience, can be dealt with and programmed around, especially when we know you don't understand the movement pattern. Now, if you understand the movement pattern and can practice this movement pattern, learn this movement pattern, and learn it with the right muscles, not necessarily the lumbar extensors, and instead the hip extensors, then I think we have a better shot of A, mastering the hip hinge, but also B, mastering the prevention of lower back pain. As you know, lower back pain is a major cause of missed work time, missed workout time, and it's much more prevalent than the rest of society will let on. Almost 80% of people at some point in their lives will suffer from low back pain severe enough that they will go to see a doctor. That is an alarmingly high number for something that should be dealt with on a daily basis. What I want to cover now is 6 exercises that I think are super important for you to A, learn, but also B, understand that you can do just about anywhere with minimal equipment. So what I'm going to do is show you the first 2. I have here a half foam roller, okay, putting it flat on the ground. From here I'm going to take a yoga block. Between my thighs, I'm going to elevate my toes just slightly. I'm going to push back from my hips, breathe out, reach down and touch my toes. I'm going to do that 10 times. For the video's sake, I'll show you 2. Next, I'm going to go the heels elevated toe touch. With the heels elevated, be careful that you don't have anything you could fall into. Okay? Again, putting the block between your thighs, squeezing that block so that it can't come out. You're going to reach down, breathe out, try to touch those toes. Again, reach down, breathe out, try to touch those toes. You should feel a nice little stretch all the way through the hamstrings and through that glute complex. maybe even some calf. After that, there's a couple other toe touch options we're going to work on. Number one, I'm going to put a band around the back of my knees. I think this is a super important version because it helps to teach you to push back from that get-go, okay? If you lose leg hair, ow. Well, I'm sorry. So from here, same concept, I'm going to push out and back on the band as I reach down and touch toes. Again, pushing back and out. You'll notice that that hip shift, that shift of the hips behind my ankles, again, working on that balance, is now assisted, okay? That's super important because, again, a lot of people don't know how to balance anterior and posterior. So, that's a band-assisted toe touch. Now, we're going to move on to exercise number 4, okay? You're going to grab your ankles, okay, sit deep into a squat, and then breathe out. Push the hips high to the ceiling. And one more. And there we go. Next, I'm going to do a band-assisted straight leg raise, but not the way you think. What I'm going to do here is raise one leg while I breathe out and brace down and pull down from my arms. So from here, I'm going to brace down as I pull down and simultaneously bring one leg up. The other leg is super important that doesn't come off the ground. I'll show you on the other side. Just like so. I think it's super important to master that because a lot of people don't understand the breathing and the arm implications when it comes to these exercises. Next, I want to show you another variation. This is a band-resisted RDL. I think that's super important because I think the back plays a major factor when you're doing the RDL / hip hinge. Let me grab my dowel here. And what I'm going to do, let's see, go this way. This up to my dowel, looking around my dowel. Okay, now from here, I'll show you kind of from the side. I'm going to get tension on the band and on the dowel. So I'm pushing back from my arms, keeping tension, making sure not to round forward, and keeping that neutral spine. When I go down to the ground, I'm going to breathe in, then breathe out, and keep tension on my lats, okay, which connect my arms all the way to my low back. And again, we're practicing this hip hinge, but now we're pushing back against resistance, but in an anterior-posterior sense. So the band is pulling me this way. I'm learning to push this way, but not necessarily from my hips, but from my arms. So I think that's a key ingredient when teaching the hip hinge, is the application of force in multiple vectors. Simple language, basically anterior, posterior, side to side. I think that's super important. That's all for today's little lesson, but again, the hip hinge is super important. So if you're struggling with low back pain and you can't touch your toes, I'd highly encourage you to take a look at these exercises, practice them on a weekly, if not daily basis, and I think you'll find they're super helpful. That's all, guys. Until next time, I'm Coach Kev.